going to build the nav bar of our website. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, we're going to come into the body here, and we're going to use a tag called nav. Now, what's important to know is just like when you use a paragraph tag or an unordered list tag, the browser calls these, they're really the semantics of HTML. And basically what that means is the more like keywords, like actual HTML keywords you can use, like nav, paragraph tags, article, section, things like that, the browser can read that and really identify and say, hey, this is a nav bar, hey, this is a paragraph body. It just makes the browser read your website better. So inside our nav bar, to build this, let's think about what we're putting in it. So we've got a nav bar, and we've got to put some links in the top there, right? So let's make an unordered list, because that's going to build some links for us, right? And we're going to create a couple of lists here. Alright, and then inside of here, let's create an anchor tag, okay? And what I'm doing right here is this is how you would set up a link tag. So this website's not going to be like active, we're just doing the front end of it. But when you're building a website, inside these list tags, you're going to put an anchor tag because you want a user, when they click on this link, like this home button, for it to be an action to take them to home. And by putting in this # home, it's when you assign an action to that, it's going to be able to take the user to the links that they clicked on. So let's go in here and type in home. And then we want to copy this and paste it a couple times because we need a, what is it, a home, about, news, and I think it was a contact. Okay. Actually, we want to do two more because remember we had a sign up and sign in. So let's change these names so they make a little bit more sense. So let's call this news, contact, about, and then this one, let's see, we want sign up to be on the left side there, and then sign in to be on the right. Cool. Alright, so now we've got our tags here. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and change these. And again, these aren't going to work, but it's a good practice just to type it out because this is what you're going to be doing when you build a fully functional website, which you'll learn in this course. Alright, so we've got that rocking. So let's go ahead and check out everything that we've done thus far. Cool. You're probably like, what? That's not even close to a nav bar. Well, there's a couple of other techniques that we need to implement to get that to work. So now we need to start throwing in some styles, okay? Let's go ahead and create our styles.css. And I'm going to put this in a vertical split and move my CSS onto the other side like we've been doing before. Now, let's look at this real fast. Let's look at the head of our website. Is this going to work? No. We've got to link our style sheet, right, to our HTML body. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, the relationship is a style sheet. And then the href, let's just link it down to our styles there. Perfect. So now, our HTML page is linked to our CSS. That's fantastic news. Alright, now let's go ahead and apply some of the defaults that we want for our browser. So some of the elements that we know we're going to be working with is we're going to have a header, because we're going to have some title sections, right? And we've got a nav bar here. And then remember we had a footer down at the bottom. So because I want all these things like section headers and nav bars and footers to stack like blocks, we're going to go ahead and grab those. And to do that, we are going to say nav, header, and footer. And we want to give it a display of a block. And this is just assuring that when the browser reads this, first opens up our website, that it's going to take these elements and display it as a block. Now, the commas in these, we could have this in a straight line if we wanted to, like this. The commas simply say that we want to take the nav element and the header element and the footer element and give it a display of block, okay? But let's go ahead. I'm going to put it back like this. It's just a little bit easier for me to read. All right, and then let's go ahead and grab our body. All right, and we're going to be having some text in our website, and we want to add a line height to that. And what that does is when you have text going across your screen, the line height is going to put a space between the text. So we're going to do this. Let's see, line height of 1, and this is just going to give it just 1 pixel of just some nice distribution, and then a margin of 0. And the reason we're doing this is when we select the entire body element, we want to say everything in the body, we want to make sure there is a margin of 0, all right, which sucks everything edge to edge, because when a browser reads a website, if the margin isn't set to 0, browsers like to add just a little bit of margin and like padding to the sides of websites. This is going to assure that everything is just sucked to the edges there. All right, cool. All right, so this is good enough for our defaults for now. As we start building more of the website and we run into other elements that we're going to be using, we'll add the defaults then. And to separate this stuff, I always like to add a comment. So what I did is I hit on the Mac Option Command / and then I'm just going to throw in some pound signs here. And I'm going to put defaults, okay? That way I know that this section is my defaults. Now, let's start styling the navbar here. So again, Option Command / I'm going to throw in some pound signs here. And I'm going to type in navbar, okay? Again, this is simply for organizational purposes. When you're going through your website and you're looking for different sections to alter or change, it's nice just to have this kind of listed out so we can check those out. So, like we learned, let's grab the first element here, our nav, okay? And let's set some properties to it. So we want this navbar to always have a width of 100%, okay? And what this is doing is it's always going to take up 100% width of the entire screen view, whether that be on desktop or mobile, all right? I'm actually going to add one more thing here. Remember how we added the margin 0 to the body? I want to do the same thing here on my navbar because, again, I want to be specific, and when the browser reads this, I want it to know that this navbar element is going to be sucked edge to edge, okay? We don't want anything adding some extra space around it. So let's dive in. So now what do we want to work with? Well, we've got this unordered list here. So let's grab our nav and the unordered list. So let's add a background color. Okay. And we're going to set it to this. This is kind of like a grayish color. Alright, so I'm using hex codes for this because this is more of a specific color that I want to get. So we're going to set a background to this, and let's think about building a mobile responsive website. So when we collapse our website, a lot of times what happens, and you might have experienced this before too, is some of the content on the page when you go from desktop to mobile doesn't fit, and then you have these little scroll bars on the page for you to like scroll over and view the rest of the content. Well, with this being a nav bar, I want to make sure and guarantee that there is no scrolling happening here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this overflow property and add hidden to it. And what this means is that any of the elements, when the browser is collapsing, any of the elements that might be too big to fit on the screen or anything, by setting it to hidden, I'm saying just clip the content, don't show it. So like if we had an image and the browser was shrinking down and only half the image was showing, if I didn't have this overflow hidden on there, you'd be able to scroll over and view the rest of the image. But in this case, with an overflow hidden, I'm saying clip the content, only show like half the image for an example, and I don't want the user to be scrolling over. It's just a really bad user experience when you're having to, scroll side to side on a mobile web page or something. All right, so we're going to add the overflow hidden, and then again, kind of like what we've been doing to this, we just want to guarantee all of our content is sucked edge to edge, okay? And then this way it also assures that none of this inherits anything from anywhere else. So that's looking pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and check out what we've got going. Well, we're making some progress. It's getting there. We've got a background color now, and it's sucked edge to edge. Now, I do want to show you something here, okay? If you right-click on your browser and click the Inspect button, it brings up these developer tools, okay? So in Chrome, you just right-click and hit Inspect. On Safari, you'd right-click and go to your developer tools, and you can inspect there. And then on Firefox, for an example, you can use Firebug to inspect the element here. So we're using Google Chrome, so you can see that I can scroll into the body. See how it has the elements that I've created here? And check this out. I've got the nav selected, and if we go over here, look how it shows the properties that we've already set. Remember the defaults that we set in the beginning to the nav header and footer to display block? Well, there it is. It's saying that this navbar has that property. We also made our specific navbar with a width of 100 and a margin of 0%. Okay? Now, if we come into the body, just want to see if this will do it for us. Do you see how I unchecked the margin? Check out the space that it just added here. You see that? And then when I check the margin, see how it sucks it edge to edge? That's exactly what I was talking about by when websites load on a browser, it has some default settings to add like padding and margin to things. But when we're specific with our elements, we can tell it exactly what to do. So I did want to show you that, how it adds that space. So if you thought I was crazy for adding margin 0 and padding zeros to these things, I just wanted to show you why. All right, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. We're going to dive into this some more as we build this website. Okay, cool. So let's switch back to our text editor. Let's work with some of this text right now. I'm really hating how that looks. All right, so let's dive into this. So we're going to take our parent element, and then we're going to dive into the siblings here and target those. Because what we want to do is when I set these styling rules to these list items, what if I had other list items throughout my website? I do not want it to have the same styling, list styling, as my nav bar. So let's do this. We're going to grab the nav, the unordered list, and then now we're going to dive into the text here, these anchors. So go ahead and we're going to type out list style, and then we're going to say none. And what this does is by adding this list style none, because we have an unordered list, this is going to assure that it doesn't add those bullet points, right? Even though we have an anchor added inside of the list items, which by tradition removes it, again, we just want to guarantee that there is no bullet point inserted. And you know what, as I look at this, we go nav view, grab the unordered list and the list item. If we think about this, we want to float some of these things left and some of them right, correct? So to do that, because it's something specific I'm doing with a list item here, or this unordered list, I'm actually going to add a class to this. And we'll call this top nav left, because we want to float a lot of these elements left. All right, so I'm actually going to get rid of this and type in the name of our class, right? Okay, cool. So clicking this here, you can see that it hasn't done anything yet to the blue links and the underline. Again, we're just reassuring that those bullet points don't show up. All right, cool. Now let's go ahead and float these left. So we're going to type in float left. Save it. So we're saying all of these elements here, the list items in the unordered list, we want to take those and float them left. So let's go ahead and check that out. We'll check that out. They're all floated left. So we're getting there. We're starting to build this navbar and getting it arranged how we want it to. Alright. We want to take these two and float them right. Remember, we've got content on the left and content on the right. So we want to do something specific with this. So to do that, I'm going to add a class to this, to the list item, because that's what we want to work with. And I'm going to call this top nav right. Okay, and then let's go ahead and copy this class and paste it on the last list item as well. Okay, so now what we've done is we want to target these two elements and float those to the right. So how should we do that? Well, let's grab our unordered list, and this is called a top nav right. Okay, and we're targeting the list item. And then we can put a float right on this. Alright, now that I'm looking at this, and this is very common as you're building out these classes and applying styles, that it's very important on the wording that you put on some of these. I put this top nav left because in my mind I was thinking, oh, we're going to float this content right, or to the left. But however, if we remove this, because we need to float this content right, I would have typed ul.topNavLeft and then tried floating right. That's not a good practice. So we want to be good in our naming conventions. So I'm going to put the top nav. I'm just going to change the name of it. We're still floating these left, and then I'm going to take these list items that I've put top nav right, and I'm going to grab the list item first, and then we're going to write top nav right. Okay, so that makes a lot more sense. Okay, so we're grabbing the parent here, and we're grabbing a very, very specific child element here with this class. Alright, so let's check that out now. Alright, cool. So you can see that we've got those four floated left, and then we targeted two very, very specific list items with the class, and those are floating right. So that's great. This thing is coming along very nicely. Alright, so now let's work with the text in here. Okay, so now that we've got everything floating right and left like we need. So to do that, let's grab our parent, the top nav, and then we are going to grab the list item, and then the anchor tag, right? So parent, child, and then we've got an anchor tag nested inside of there. Alright, so how do we want these to display? Well, it's good to display these in a block. Okay. And then we need to get rid of the underline. So we can actually add a property called text decoration, and we can say none. Okay, so let me show you this. So that took away the underline of it. Do you see that? Took away the underline. Alright, cool. Now let's add a font size. It's really, really small. Now we can do this two ways. Okay, we could either type a font size of 16 pixels. I think that will be a good font size for it. Or instead of font size, you can actually do a min height. That's another option. And what that means is as the browser shrinks, it just makes sure that, hey, the minimum height on this text will always be 16 pixels. And so just to assure that, to make sure there's nothing that somehow is going to shrink the text of this, because this is a nav bar, it's got to be easy to click. I don't want the text to be super small. So instead of using a font size, I'm going to do a minimum height of 16 pixels. That means that's as low as it can go. Alright, and then we're going to add a text align center. We definitely need some padding around our elements here. There's just not enough space around it, right? So let's do 14 pixels, and then this is a pretty cool property, transform. let's see, transform. We want text transform, okay? And then you can actually do this to uppercase. So all of these, we've just got the first letter capitalized in it. This is a really cool style here. This is going to take our text and it's just going to uppercase all of it. So let's go ahead and preview how this is looking. Wow, that looks really nice. We gave it some padding, so now the text has some room to spread out and stretch its legs. And then let's change the text color here. And we're going to change it to a darker gray, which we can use the 666. Oh, 666. Just kidding. All right, so let's check that out again. That is looking much better, and it's looking much more like the navbar that we wanted in the beginning. Very cool. So the only thing that we need to add to this is a hover effect, right? So let's come into here, and we need to target the list items here. So to do that, we're going to grab its parent with its class, top nav. All right, and then we want to dive into the list item and the anchor, okay? And we actually want to add an action here. So you follow this by a colon and simply write the action hover, and let's give it a background color of 0080FF, and this is a blue color, see that? And then we've got gray text right now, and when it highlights, to get it to show up better in this blue box that's going to be highlighting, we want to add a color of white text. Okay, and you can type out white or the hex code for it like this. Okay, all right, very cool. So let's go ahead and check that out. I'm going to refresh here. Look at that. We've got our hover. So that's it for this lesson. So we just created a nav bar. All right, we floated some of our elements to the left, we floated the other elements to the right, and we also were able to add an effect on the hover when we mouse over the buttons. So that's a wrap for this lesson. Let's move on.